Welcome to the Shark Tank Podcast. Each week, one of the best entrepreneurs from ABC's network smash hit Shark Tank teaches you how to swim with the sharks without being eaten alive. And now your host, serial entrepreneur, TJ Hale.
What's up, Shark Tank entrepreneurs? It's time to stop the madness. I'm joined today by Alex Kenjeev. He's actually the right-hand man of Mr. Wonderful, KevinO'Leary. Alex, pleasure to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm great, TJ. Thanks for having me.
All right, so for those who listen to my show, you know that I talk to a lot of Kevin's entrepreneurs. Every time that I do, Alex's name comes up, but you might not be familiar with it. So I want to bring Alex on as Kevin's right-hand man and ask him a little bit about the inner workings of the company, find out if Kevin needs a left-hand man, in case you go down with a hamstring pull, Alex. I'd like to make sure I'm on speed dial, and just kind of get a feel for what your role is in the company and what we can expect to see this year from O'Leary Ventures and from Shark Tank. So does that sound good?
Sure. Yeah, great.
All right, so you're in Canada. You guys are fast forward a couple of years, but you still look like you're doing business. Tell me about an average day as president of O'Leary Ventures. What does it look like?
The best thing about it is that no 2 days are the same. We've got so many deals in so many different industries, right? I've got retail businesses, business-to-business companies, B2B companies. I've got, online companies, brick and mortar, you name it. So every day we're in the trenches helping them with whatever comes up, putting out fires, helping with new strategic ideas, looking at the reports as they come in, keeping an eye on things, right? We try and be as supportive as we can because at the end of the day, we are minority owners. That means we should be good partners. So there's a sort of a push-pull that happens. But more often than not, it's the entrepreneurs that are knocking on my door saying, hey, Alex, can you help with this or that opportunity, etc. Just to give you an example, we just had a long weekend that ended, and right before the long weekend began, we found out that one of our companies had an issue at Amazon where their product, there was a mistake where you go to buy their product and then you'd click to buy, and then Amazon would actually ship you a competing product, not our product. Big problem. We're getting negative reviews as a result, etc. It's a perfect time, for an O'Leary, for us to play the O'Leary card, right? So, as you might suspect, we've got a great relationship with Amazon. So I call into my guy on his cell phone right before the long weekend. I can't tell you what his name is, but hey, Amazon guy, we've got an emergency here, right? Do you need me to get Kevin on the line or what's going on? Oh my God, let me call my supervisor. And then, an hour later it's resolved. It's a mixture of things like that, and then information coming in, keeping an eye, etc. And then of course, the new deals. So right now, I've got about a dozen companies that we're looking at from season 8 at various stages of the due diligence process, and I expect to get a whole bunch more when we go back to filming a week from now.
Excellent. So I'm visualizing in my mind, this is like a red bat phone that you call when you need an emergency. Like, I've got my finger on the button. I don't want to have to get Kevin involved, and the problem just solves itself, which is interesting because I went in your Twitter feed, and there was a retweet from Kevin where he said, this is why Alex is my right-hand man. The guy has a solution for any problem before it's even a problem. It's pretty high praise. How did you become the problem solver? Tell us about how, and actually let me premise this question because you're the president of O'Leary Ventures. Kevin has made no bones about the fact that money is pretty important to him. I liked it when he compared him to soldiers that he sends out every night to capture more soldiers. I would be worried if I was the general of those soldiers that I disappear in the middle of the night in my sleep if anything ever happened to him. So do you sleep pretty soundly, Alex?
I sleep pretty soundly because, luckily we've had a really good run. We've got a great team of entrepreneurs, and I think our money's in good hands. For what it's worth, I'm actually pleasantly surprised at the success we've had. I look at our portfolio, and I think we've lost money once. Fingers crossed. Of course, I'm jinxing it by saying that, right? Because venture investing is risky. But our results so far have been outstanding. And it really comes down to the amazing men and women that we've done deals with. So they've saved my ass, basically.
So tell me about you personally. I looked on Google News, I searched your name, and there's not a lot. You kind of keep a low profile. So for those who hadn't heard of you before today, tell us how you got the position, how you and Kevin met, how long you've been with the company. Kind of give us the 3-minute overview of how this all happened.
Sure. Kevin needs like anybody, right, needs a great person that he can trust to sort of oversee and have that mixture of strategic thinking, but also is able to get their hands dirty and has that perspective of entrepreneurship. So he really wanted to find somebody that had an entrepreneurial background, somebody who had been there at a fast-growing, successful startup, and also who had deal experience, right? Because you need to know how to run these negotiations, et cetera.
Right.
The real sort of skill that you need for this job is the sort of herding cats skill, right? Are you very good at getting different people with variously big egos, appropriately big egos, because they're all very successful, both the entrepreneurs and the sharks, and can you bring them together and get them to listen to each other and respect each other and ultimately come to a deal? It's not so simple. The first step that you see on camera, the handshake, that's kind of the easy part. The devil is often in the details, and to get it past that finish line, it takes a certain type of personality and etc. So that's really what he was looking for. My background fit that quite nicely. So I had co-founded a software startup called Dayforce. We were acquired by Ceridian for a couple $100 million. And then after that, before that, I had worked with a guy who was very shark-like, but just not on television. But he was like he was a guy who had sold his business for a huge amount of money, was looking to invest some of that. And I think we looked at 18 or 19 deals together over a couple of years that I worked with him. And then we ended up co-founding the software company together. So those two things together, and then I had a little bit of legal knowledge on top of that, sort of sealed it, because it's sort of hard to find that mix. But I don't know if my CV would have conveyed it. I think in hindsight, what makes me good at this job isn't really any of that, although it all helps. It's more the listening skills and the kind of corralling and getting people to get along. As weird as that sounds, because we're all supposed to be mean, right?
Yeah, and, I read in your bio, I think it might have been on Instagram, that co-founder, Dayforce, startup investor, CTV, tree hugger. So I know Kevin's got some great one-liners. Did being a tree hugger prevent him from bringing you on board? Does that ever cause any issues?
I had to warn him, right before we signed the deal. I'm a little not quite as right-wing as you, I think is how I phrased it. I was a little scared at that time. At this point, it's all fine. We make jokes, we get along great. But yeah, we're perfectly aligned on business, let's put it that way.
Well, I still want to know what his immediate response was to your comment. Was it, well, just keep it to yourself and we'll be fine? Or
so that's fine. Look, you don't get that to be that successful by, only working with people who are just like you. If anything, it's the opposite, right? You've got to surround yourself with people who bring something else to the table, like a yin yang or whatever it is. So I don't think it's a negative at all. Of course, it's not really relevant to the job either.
Yeah, exactly. And then, just out of curiosity, where are you from originally? Were you born in Canada, or did you immigrate to Canada?
I am. I was born in Montreal, Quebec.
Okay.
My father was exiled from the Soviet Union for being a dissident.
Wow.
My mom was over there on exchange as a student, and they were sort of boyfriend and girlfriend. KGB decided to go easy on him and say, "Listen, we can send you to Siberia, but we know you have a Canadian girlfriend. If you want to hightail it out of here, you got 3 days."
Wow. Make sure that's in your book. I'd love to read that story. That's fantastic.
That's the story. So I'm Canadian, live in Toronto. We're in the States all the time, as you can imagine. Almost all of our deals now are American. So I'm in New York regularly, LA, Miami. My wife is actually from Miami.
Okay.
So I spend a lot of time down there as well.
Excellent. I guess your father was very lucky. I don't recall hearing a lot of stories where people were allowed to choose between Siberia.
It's very unusual. Yeah, very, very unusual.
Canada, Siberia. They didn't give a lot of people that choice, as far as I know. That's
Funny.
So I have a couple other questions and things I'd like to ask you about, but there was a really funny story that caught my attention in one of the articles I did see. It was about you having dinner talking about Kevin and how he's allergic to garlic. And I'm going to link to my podcast with Kevin down here for those who haven't heard it, because I thought he was very jovial, lighthearted. I actually have told some people that I lamented that Mr. Wonderful never showed up. I just interviewed KevinO'Leary the whole time, and I wasn't expecting that. Do you ever get that reaction from people?
Absolutely. That was my own reaction. And I sort of, when I weighed the pros and cons of this job, I thought to myself, geez, in the cons column, here's this really mean guy, right, from what you see on television. And, am I prepared to be abused for the next chapter of my life? And then is that worth it? And I sort of reached the conclusion that, yeah, it's worth it. And I have to say, so my expectations on that area were low. I figured it's all going to be worth it because I get to work with all these entrepreneurs, which is what I've always wanted to do in so many different industries. There were a lot of positives, but yeah, that was like a negative. And it turns out, it's not the case at all. Kevin is a very, very respectful guy, one of the best bosses I've worked with or even seen anyone work with, in the sense that he really empowers people, believes in them if they deliver, right? As you know from television. But the reality is, of course you have to deliver. I mean, just because he comes out and says that, would you rather somebody that didn't tell you that something was off and then you sort of found out, because your stuff was all on the curb, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And actually you had I think it was in a different article. I had read something about you where you wrote an article about being Kevin's executive VP or whatever it was. And one of the lines you had in there was very good. Maybe it was a blog article or an AMA, but you said, it's around the back of my screen here, the truth hurts some, but white lies hurt everyone. I actually really like that a lot. I think that's kind of endemic of politics, right? When you tell the truth, no one wants to hear it, but it's beneficial. When you tell lies, you don't get in trouble, but eventually someone's harmed by it. So it's kind of the analogous to what you're saying right now in terms of business.
I think that's right. And, you think about your own life. I mean, I know for me, it's the friends that I can count on to give me, feedback that is often negative. Those are the guys you call when you really need an honest opinion that can be helpful, right? And look, there are other times in life, and they're probably not in business, frankly, but in other times in your life, you don't want that, right? You just want somebody to say, yeah, whatever it is you just told me, oh, what a shame. Oh, I really empathize. And that's great, and that's important. But for me, I've always sought out people who are honest with me, and I try and return the favor as well. Right down to do these pants make me look fat? Yeah, honey, you know what? They do a little. It's worth it in the long run, because the next time when they don't, she knows you're telling the truth. What's that worth? Yeah,
I guess that's a lesson I still need to learn, because that's a line I probably haven't been willing to cross yet. But I'm teasing. So
it's a long-term investment. It pays dividends later. Not the time that you give the negative comment, but the next time when it's positive, right?
Yeah. It's just hard to stay consistent during marriage in that moment when you get asked the question that you don't want to ask honestly. But you were at a restaurant and you mentioned to someone that Kevin was allergic to garlic. And I'm going to read this verbatim because I thought it was really funny. He said, when the food arrived, you realized that you didn't mention the allergy to your server, so you send the food back sheepishly, which I try not to do because that could be scary. But it was a nice restaurant. You ordered a lobster salad instead, and then you mentioned that Kevin was embarrassed to say it, so you will. It's because Kevin's a vampire. I thought that was comedy gold. That was very good. So he's actually a vampire.
I stole that line from Damon, but I'll take the credit, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, I think I did. But yeah. Yeah, it's true. Kevin is allergic to garlic, and yeah, what can I say? He ordered the lobster salad, and I had to explain. There was a journalist at the table, so I had to explain what was going on, which was vampirism.
Keep him from feeding anyone in the restaurant. There was actually another line tied to this where you mentioned that it's always, I think this was Kevin's line, not yours, always be the antagonist, not the protagonist. Being the good guy is not interesting. Vampires are interesting, as are a-holes, jerks, and bullies. So we don't have O'Leary and Lang here. But in terms of business, that contradicts what you said earlier about building relationships and working with other people. So does that apply consistently to everything in business, or are we talking strictly TV here and ratings and getting people to stay glued to the television?
Interesting. I think the two are compatible when you think about how, if your sort of policy is to be honest, and then there's going to be a certain percentage of the time that it comes across that way. And then for television purposes, when you bring in the magic of editing, what you get is an antagonist, right? But it doesn't mean that the person is always like that. Well, the consistent thread isn't that they're always nasty. It's that they're honest. They respect you enough, right, to tell you what they really think. And sometimes it'll be negative. Now, look, I mean, each Shark Tank episode is really edited, and they do a great job. I'm not trying to say that it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. People at home learn. right? What's good and what's bad. But, your 5 minutes of feedback that includes 2.5 minutes of positive and 2.5 minutes of negative, guess which 2 minutes they'll pick from, right? The more interesting one. So I think it's definitely a balance. I think Kevin sees himself also as balancing out others who are, whether it's on Shark Tank or just in the sort of, mass culture, if you like, who leave out the negative. And so he feels that by injecting an extra dose of sort of, you could call negativity, really what he's doing is bringing sort of balance to the force, overall. And I don't know if he would echo that, but I think he would. Because if you actually work with him, it's not sort of all nasty all the time. Far from it.
Yeah, he would. Wonder if he would agree with the Star Wars reference to him bringing balance to the Force. He's an evil Sith Lord, apparently.
A good example is the way he calls people cockroaches. People take that as such an insult, but that's just for him, that's just a flowery metaphor for your size relative to others in your industry, right? Like, I think sometimes it's good to be a cockroach. Cockroaches have been around for billions of years, right? So part of whether you choose to be insulted or take it as a sign of respect that someone's being really direct with you, part of that's on Kevin, part of that's on the audience too, and on the person who he's speaking with. And you see that sometimes. You see people who take the feedback, come back, change their business accordingly, or whatever. In fact, in due diligence, it happens all the time. It's a really helpful process that we go through together, and I share all my findings, including my misunderstandings. Hey, it looks to me like here are my calculations. What do you think? Oh, that openness and honesty, sometimes it hurts, but overall the effect is really positive.
It's interesting you bring that up. I just penned an article that I submitted last week, so it's probably going to post about the same time as this interview, but I mentioned some of the best one-liners from Shark Tank, because I think the criticisms that they do air, some of them they're gold, they're useful, they're good. I call them witticisms, right? And the one that I chose for Kevin, was never love something that won't love you back. But I wanted to explain that the thing I love about Kevin is that I've had a lot of entrepreneurs come on my show who, if I say, look, what was something that we didn't see that you wish we had? Or what was something you learned that you didn't expect from the experience? More often than not, their answer has something to do with what I now refer to as the Kevin blind spot. When they went in and said, as long as we don't make eye contact with KevinO'Leary, this process should be pretty positive. And then they leave and think, you know what? Looking back, the advice, counsel, or the feedback we got from Kevin was the most useful because he was flowery. He didn't sugarcoat it. He told us the truth. Whether or not he was interested in doing the deal. He said behind cameras, it's actually very, very beneficial to them. So I gave him a little nod in the article because I think that's really important, and I hear it a lot. You, on the other hand, Alex, I've got a clip from you where apparently Kevin scolded you for being too hard. Let me go to this real quick. It says when you first went to the Shark Tank filming, you got in trouble because you were too aggressive with one of your entrepreneurs. Maybe this is made up. Right. You can tell me.
No, it's true. It's absolutely true. It's the only time I got in serious trouble with Kevin. Yeah. The only time.
Well, go. You tell it. I'm going to slaughter. You tell the story. What happened?
Well, just imagine, I got an email, hey, we need to talk. Oh God, I'm still in my first few months of work. Like, what have I done wrong? I didn't even realize. I'm sort of like terrified, right? And sure enough, he's got a table reserved at a fancy restaurant up the road. He's got a, there is no lunch menu. There's just a glass of wine and nothing.
Pad of paper.
And it was naive me thinking our job here is to be as mean as possible. And it was one of these situations where you meet the entrepreneur after the shooting. And, I had sort of, we used to have like an agreement we would ask them to sign, just like a good faith sort of letter, just to show that they're really serious and they want to go. I still do that, by the way, we still have that. But it used to be that I would ask them to sign it. I would give it to them right then and there. Whereas now I've sort of mellowed out a little and I give them some more time. That's all technical. What matters is, these guys were pushing back on some clauses in there, which, by the way, also happens all the time. These things, it's usually a conversation. I've learned so much since then. It's hilarious. I'm sort of looking back on like a child version of myself.
Yeah, shame.
Yeah. And so, I just decided, what the hell, I'm going to play the hard ass card, and say, I use some harsh words. I guess I shouldn't repeat what the exact words are because it would give away what the deal was. But I use some very specific language about, hey, if you don't sign this right now or within the next day, XYZ will happen, right? And
like everyone will call your product Suck Pack. Wait, I just gave it away. No, never mind. Yeah, I understand.
It's the type of, if I told you, it would give away. But it was not really like a threat, but it was not the kind of respectful, listening type of businessman that I try to be. I don't think I lived up to my own ideals and principles on that occasion, let alone Kevin's. Nevertheless, I kind of thought, oh yeah, that's what we do here. We yell at people. No, Alex, you can't be like this. What do you need me to do? I don't have time to replace you right now. If you're going to be like this, you can't be part of the team. Do you need me to get you like a life coach or something to work on your social skills? I'm like, actually, no. Like I thought I was supposed to be mean. If I could just be myself, it'll be fine. Anyway, ended up not being an issue. Never happened again.
You were playing the role, huh? And it got you in trouble. That's very interesting.
Yeah, a little bit.
I think I might have taken the life coach. Maybe a short trip to Cancun for a couple of days to mellow. I mean, it was bad timing, of course, but something could have worked out nice.
Didn't end up going for it, but
now it's interesting because as I think back to what happened with Kevin this last season, there's a guy that I follow online. I read some of his content, and his brother was on Shark Tank, and this is the most rattled that Kevin's ever been. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. His name's Manish Sethi. And I actually sent him a line afterwards, said, hey, I'd like to have you on the show and talk about like what happened here. Because on my show, I get a lot of comments. People don't like Kevin. I do. I like Kevin a lot. And I wanted to find out if what we missed or if that really is how it went down, because it seemed like it was pretty shady to me. And I read online, I think it might have been you who said that Kevin was pretty upset about it. In fact, it said here that in the following it says the other sharks consoled him, and after they were done taping, the on-set psychiatrist, typically reserved for the entrepreneurs, actually checked in on Kevin, which I think would have made a great behind-the-scenes clip. But it says he was pretty rattled.
We never find out what happens in the psychologist's room. It's like completely confidential. So
keep you isolated.
Fortunately, that's the one person who will never agree to an interview.
Yeah, really. So they'll write a tell-all book eventually. But so I thought that was pretty interesting to have someone come in and basically just completely. You know what I really thought? Because it's reality TV, I thought this must be a plan. Like, who would come in here and purposely just create this much controversy to their own detriment? But I bring this up because I'd like to ask you specifically about that, if you don't want to talk about that, about other experiences in the Shark Tank that you can share that you think my listeners would enjoy. What kind of adventures you've had in there that you can share with us?
Oh boy, I mean, too many to list. I mean, it's such a crazy, every day is different and every pitch is different. I think on the one you mentioned, what really, I'm sort of a little torn about it because, on the one hand, you got to respect the guy for doing a great TV gimmick. I mean, you haven't even named his product, and we all know what it is, right? It's very memorable what he did. So, as a kind of a marketing stunt, very clever. What I found really puzzling about it, was, first of all, just to get this out of the way, I think it's weird to come on Shark Tank and not be interested in an offer from any one of the sharks. It's a little strange. Okay, but let's just put that concern aside for a sec, just for the sake of discussion. Assume that that's not sort of bad form.
Okay.
And if that weren't bad form, right? In the sort of ordinary business world, I think most people can understand that not every sort of high-profile investor or fund or celebrity even, it's not always going to be a perfect fit for between what they represent and what your company's trying to do. And sometimes it makes sense to turn away an investment for those kinds of marketing reasons. It can make sense. I mean, if you're, I'm trying to think of an example. If you're, I don't know, if you're, for some reason, my mind is blanking on an example. But funds have certain mandates and philosophies, and sometimes companies have philosophies that differ from that. So it's not that I don't get it. What I found particularly bizarre about Pavlok, which I am assuming is what you're talking about, this was a product that zaps you when you sort of disobey, if you like, right? So the idea is that they call it aversion therapy, and the idea is that if you catch yourself doing something bad, it zaps you, sort of. I'm sort of oversimplifying, but that's basically how the product works. Can you tell me how that's not a good fit for the mean shark that sort of zaps people?
This is exactly the living room conversation.
It's actually a perfect fit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying there's no company out there that's a bad fit for us. They're out there. How is this one of them? That's what I found weird. I don't think anyone took things personally. I think, for what it's worth, I mean, behind the scenes or whatever, within about 15 minutes, Kevin was fine. And, we were all talking about how, oh my goodness, what a day, like in a positive way, like how interesting was that?
Yeah.
He really, doesn't, it's remarkable the extent to which he doesn't take things personally. I'm a little bit envious, actually.
Really?
If it was me, I'd be affected for, I'd be upset for, I don't know, a few days. I mean, I don't hold a grudge or anything, but I'm talking, span of minutes. So
what you said is, so my wife and I will pause and we'll say, hey, what do you think here? I mean, and I'm skeptic, right? I said, maybe this is a network ploy. I just don't understand it. And especially for that reason, you're taking the shark that has this antagonistic viewpoint, and you could and he's interested in the product, and then you're going to say that the things that he said, which for anyone who's watching who doesn't remember this, I'll link to some places where you can go check it out. And I thought, man, there's potential here. There's upside. There's blue sky.
I mean, he thought there was a lack of fit between what he saw as his company's mission and, what Kevin, represents, for lack of a better explanation. That's what he said. Is that true? Not sure. It seems odd to me. But look, it achieved its purpose. Here we are talking about it. You can't completely disrespect the guy. It's frustrating to us. If people keep doing that, it would ruin. It's the kind of thing that happens once, great drama. Happens too many times, it would ruin the show. So, perhaps the only reason I'm not angry and annoyed and vindictive is because it's only happened once.
Yeah, it's a valid point. And it actually lends me to my next question, which is, I asked Kevin in our interview, how do you keep the show fresh? Reality TV is its own greatest enemy when you're successful. And we chatted about that for a while. Now we're in season 8. There's rumors that the show might be coming down to a close, even though the ratings are still very strong. And I'm curious if we're going to, I just read that they're going to have all 5 sharks sharing the same panel. What can you tell us to expect in terms of season 8 changes, activity, nuances, newisms? What are we going to see that we haven't seen before?
Sure. Well, season 8 is about half done taping now, so we've still got a lot that even I haven't seen.
Right.
But what I have seen so far was going to knock your socks up. I mean, the deals are out of control in terms of the quality. I mean, I guess it's just an effect of more people applying, so maybe a bigger applicant pool every year. But my goodness, I mean, it's one after another, like strong, good companies. Of course, there are some that look good at first and then it sort of falls apart on stage. Otherwise, the show would be bad. But it's a really, really great mix. In terms of the panels, I have to keep my lips sealed because the producers will come and kill me.
Come after you, yeah.
But,
which is a sacrifice I'm willing to make, but I respect you. I respect you holding boundaries.
Well, you're in for some very cool surprises there in terms of different panels, different combinations, and I've probably already said too much.
Fair enough.
Fact, I can feel my anklet buzzing. They're going to haul me away here.
You've got your that's the aversion therapy is working?
Yeah. I've already said too much.
It needed a hologram where Kevin's face popped up and actually spoke to you. I think that would have been unbeatable on the market.
I think if I could just add, in terms of keeping the show fresh, I mean, it's such a wonderful format because it's always fresh, because business and entrepreneurialism is always fresh, right? The only thing that's the only thing that is constant is the fact of newness. Because if you're not innovating, you have nothing, basically. Right. I mean, sure, can you make money selling the same thing as the guy across the road? Yes, but over time with competition, prices and eventually equalize and eventually become this arbitrage opportunities decline over time is the academic way of explaining it.
Right. And
so, I don't see how the show could ever not be fresh. I mean, I think they're in season 20 or something in the UK. And this is where it really helps that Kevin's a vampire, because, living forever really makes it easier to keep a show going.
Yeah, not having to sleep. Those are all huge benefits. I totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of your role with the company and the process, I think so many people are curious about what happens after the cameras stop rolling, which is why my show is popular. Talk to us about the intake process. They come off camera, Kevin runs off to the meat cart, gets on the private jet, and then you show up and do all the hard work. I mean, what's really happening there? And tell us some of the criteria for these deals getting done, what you look for, and what your focus is this year for O'Leary companies. Kind of, if you can kind of put all those together, put a bow on them.
Sure. It's interesting because we don't have a single industry focus. There's a huge variety of what comes into the Shark Tank, right? No two deals are the same. So, I'll tell you what we don't do is we don't walk in there with a standard printed form of, here's what everyone's deal looks like. Here you go, sign here, right? If I did that, I wouldn't get any deals done. I mean, it would just be impossible. So a lot of it is listening, getting to know the person, understanding what drives them, what drives this business. What do the next 3, 4, 5 years look like according to our plans? And I usually, with my team, we build that internally. So we say, how do we see the next few years playing out? Understand what their key assumptions are and really kind of wrap our heads around the key levers of a particular business, right? What are the most important things that drive, whether it's sales or costs or whatever it is? And it's usually a mixture of qualitative things and quantitative things. I really leave no stone unturned in terms of research to verify assumptions. So if your assumption is that every American has 1.7 toilets in their house, let's just say, I'm going to find out if that's really the case. And if it's actually 1.6, how does that affect our projections? Actually, that would barely affect them at all. But if I looked into it and it turns out that you thought the number was 4 and it's actually 1, you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. You don't really know at the outset what's going to turn on what, right? And the objective is not so much to pass any fixed list of criteria, although there's some of that. The bigger thing is this is a process where by the end of it we want to be helpful, right? These entrepreneurs, remember, it's not just a financial transaction, right? This is their life, right? And so they're also evaluating us to some extent. They want to see that we're actually going to be helpful as an organization. Of course, they understand the enormous benefit of having a shark on board, having the Shark Tank effect, being on the show, but also all the ancillary support. That is a given, right? But they also want to know, as any human being would, right? What am I doing here? Who are these people? What's happening? And so the diligence process is really, really helpful for that, because as we get to know each other and the business, what's also happening is that Kevin and I and our team, we're also becoming more used. It's like our training, right? So by the end of this process, once we've closed and wired them the money and become shareholders or royalty holders or whatever it is, we're actually pretty much up to speed, and we actually know, what are the 2 or 3 things we can do that would be the most helpful? What are the questions we can ask? What kind of guidance can we provide?
Very interesting. And I'm curious, I know that I was talking with another Sharks team, and they were mentioned they're beefing up their retail sector plays this year. If I were an entrepreneur going on Shark Tank and I'm evaluating the prospects for different sharks, what is O'Leary Ventures? What's the focus? What are you doing this year that might have been different from years past? When I interviewed Kevin, he had just gone on his QVC bender, right? 3 straight days or whatever it was.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, QVC.
First thing in the morning, I think he was still kind of burning it out of his system, but he was very proud of that accomplishment and how much they sold.
QVC is crazy. You cannot disrespect that place once you've been there. It's unbelievable. I don't know if he talked to you about that. I haven't heard his interview, but my goodness. I mean, these guys measure sales per second, and you can see it live. And it's unbelievable. As a person who really respects business process, it blew my mind. I've been there 4 or 5 times now. That is one channel for sure. I think in general we're really kind of finding our groove in terms of, we've got processes now to help these companies. A big part of it is around PR and media support. It's also, we've ended up, sort of by mistake. I think all the Sharks teams have become almost retail experts, right? And I include, whether that's online or brick and mortar or through distributors or whatever. But we've all kind of become better at figuring out how to get products into the hands of customers. If I were an entrepreneur trying to decide whether to go on Shark Tank or not, I think this is what you're getting at. Here's what I would think about. And I think this is not something that my job is in good faith to try and make it work. Whatever it is was agreed to on TV. I'm just trying to make sure that it's not totally insane and everything's going to make sense. And what are the minimum protections that we need, right? And really, that's what it is. I mean, I'm trying to take the least number of terms and conditions that I can because I'm trying to get a deal done. So, that's kind of what I do. But as an entrepreneur, I think the bigger decision is, what is my business trying to do? And then how much does that model actually benefit from this incredible platform and opportunity? Because let's be frank here. You're most likely, if your business is good, right, and you've got a good plan and solid earnings and cash flow, chances are pretty good you can find money somewhere. Money is kind of like a commodity if you're a good business. And so is Shark Tank the cheapest and most convenient source of capital? Not even close, right? I mean, are you kidding? You got to go on the show. It takes forever. You got to wait and audition, right? And then you meet me on the taping day, and I love you and I want to get to know you, but unfortunately, that same week I probably got 15 other deals to look at. So just not my fault, not our fault, but I explain this to them always the first day, please be patient because we get a whole influx of deals all at once. So it takes 3 to 5 months.
Yeah, you're mega speed dating while you meet them, right? And then they're out the door.
Well, no. It's not that. I mean, I'm on the deal right away. What I'm talking about is that in a normal, if you go to a normal bank or investor or whatever, it's not the case that they get, dozens of deals all at once. It's because of the way we film Shark Tank. We film a whole bunch in July and then a little bit more in September. And it's every day, all day, right? So I'm just trying to explain why it takes a little bit longer for us to get closed. So our deals go from initial conversation to being closed. It takes about 3 months-ish, sometimes 4 to 6 months. Now, if you've got an incredible business with a cash flow that's going up every month, I'm trying to say, here are some of the reasons why you could probably find cheaper, faster money elsewhere, if that's all you need, if it's all that it's about. So I think entrepreneurs who are thinking about going on the show should ask themselves, how much do we benefit from, not just this exposure, but the whole package of Shark Tank, right? Which is, America gets to follow you and root for you. You're going to get these sharks as investors who have, I think, very sophisticated teams and organizations around them, plus great personalities and just great people to work with, and they're well known and they can open doors. And, it seems obvious when you watch the show that all these things have a huge benefit. But it's not always true, believe it or not. There are some examples of pretty good businesses that would not benefit as much and where I would question. So, for example, let's say that I'm a salt company and I provide salt to big cities buy salt from me to put it on the roads to help prevent the snow from building up. How does that benefit? It doesn't matter. I'm going to have 5 or 6 clients total, each of which is buying tens of millions of dollars of product. It's a commodity, so there's no room to improve pricing through better marketing. Doesn't matter. Right. Does it matter that 8 million Americans will see it? And you got to no, right? I'm using an extreme example, but there's a spectrum of where you fall on this. And there are businesses where there's no doubt, a great example is Geek My Tree. It probably takes 6 or 7 minutes, which is the length of a Shark Tank pitch, to explain to America why it's okay to spend a couple $100 on an amazing Christmas tree that, has different patterns and the technology behind it and all of this stuff. That is a no-brainer on the other end of the spectrum. So I think that would be the biggest question for entrepreneurs to think about.
Yeah, and that was also, the line is starting to blur when you watch Shark Tank between the different benefits, the differentiators between the sharks, right? In terms of Kevin doing QVC and Mark Cuban's team getting more involved in retail. So that was one of the main drivers of having you on the show, so people can see who's actually turning the wheel behind Team O'Leary, because it's the teams that are bringing a lot of that value, led by the shark, at least from my experience talking with the entrepreneurs working. And so it's fun to kind of get familiar with who's making things happen. And by the way, Geek My Tree, I've got a video where he and I spoke at a show recently. You called him on a cell phone while I was recording an interview with him. It was pretty funny. So that's what spurred this conversation today.
Sorry to interrupt.
He's like, hang on, it's Alex. This is important. I'll be right back. He disappeared for an hour. Never came back. So Alex, it's been a real joy speaking with you, at least for me. I hope the viewers have enjoyed it. I'm really excited about seeing your new entrepreneurs on Shark Tank. I do have a business proposition. It's not a pitch because you're actually going to be my partner. I had this idea to create a SaaS algorithm where we could basically hijack buy buttons on Amazon and sell our products to people without them knowing it. And you actually already had some experience with this. You mentioned that earlier. So I feel like someone stole my idea, but you've got inside baseball knowledge. Can we do this? Can we make this happen?
Done. Yeah. What do I sign?
I'll send you paperwork. It's not it's a standard form though. I know you don't like those, but that's what it is. And the last thing is you're a problem solver. Kevin said that's what you do for him, and I think that's a hypo. You hit at a high level. So what is the most frustrating, difficult, or consistent problem that you're solving over there? What's the one that? Tell me about your biggest problem that you consistently have to solve for these entrepreneurs.
I think helping them manage their working capital is something, and that's a great one to talk about, because it's one where a little bit of nudging goes a long way. This is something that we often are able to improve dramatically. So I'll give you, it's sort of tricky to explain, but I'm sure your listeners understand the concept of profit margin, right? Of every dollar that comes in, how much of that is profit, right? But there's another concept that people rarely think about, and they don't really have time to explain on Shark Tank, which is the concept of working capital, and the way that you calculate that number. There's a formula, you can Google it, but basically it comes down to the difference in time, on average, between when you get paid for your product and when you have to pay your suppliers. And the magical thing that we can sometimes do, not always, but we always try, is to help entrepreneurs change that equation a little bit. And here's the crazy part that may seem counterintuitive. I would often advise them even if it means reducing your profitability a little bit, it's usually still worth it. So as an example, let's say that you get a huge order from Walmart or some huge buyer, right? And which would you rather have? Would you rather have it with great profit margins and they're offering you, let's say, a $5 million order, but ship us the product today and we'll pay you 90 days later. P.S. Your supplier has the opposite problem. You need to pay your supplier right away, and we'll give you $5 million in 90 days. Well, guess what? You need $5 million of working capital to fill that order. And if all goes well and they send an order for 10 million and then 15, every single time it happens, you're screwed. What are you going to do to plug that gap? Well, maybe actually Walmart's not the best example because it's a known vendor, but let's say it's let's say it's a purchase order where they can return the product, or where it's not so certain that they'll pay. Now what? You can't just go and factor it so easily necessarily. You may end up having to issue equity and dilute yourself more every time because you're always running out of cash. You're hitting a wall all the time. Your growth is constrained by capital. So if I can help mentor you or maybe make some calls to some of these companies and say, hey guys, look, instead of 5 million, let's make it 4.5 or something. Yeah, I'm cutting my profit down, but you got to pay me at least, I don't know, half up front, and the rest, I don't really care. God knows when, right? At least pay me enough up front that I can cover my costs.
Right.
Now you're fully scalable. You're not capital constrained. And this is one of the easiest changes that we can often make, even in one conversation, before we even close due diligence. A week later, I get a call saying, Alex, you wouldn't believe it. I never thought they'd agree. But, I got just enough up front that I can pay my supplier now. And yeah, the rest was supposed to be 30 days later, but the rest is now 60 days later. And I say, yes, because that's now we don't need to put in more money later. And more importantly for you as the owner, you don't have to get diluted more.
So they're not waiting on that sales cycle to complete before they can move on to the next deal, because it's self-capitalized basically.
That's right.
That was a great nugget. Appreciate that. Very good advice. Yeah. You made sense of a question that made no sense and gave a great answer. So that's what I like in my guests. Alex, been a pleasure having you on. You said you're leaving next week to go film again?
That's right, yeah.
It's exciting, and I think the premiere's on the 23rd. So where are you and Kevin going to be on September 23rd?
I think we will...
Or can you not tell us?
I think the last day of filming is the 22nd, so we may still be in LA or not. Stay tuned, I guess.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye out for you. For my listeners, this is Alex Kenjeev, KevinO'Leary's right-hand man and the president of O'Leary Ventures. Thank you very much for jumping in, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you for jumping in to the Shark Tank podcast. Please subscribe to the show on iTunes and head over to SharkTankPodcast.net to get the show notes from each episode and join the free Shark Tank Insiders list. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at Shark Tank Podcast and on Twitter at Shark Tank PDcast.
I'm a big fan of money. I like it. I use it. I have a little. I keep it in a jar on top of my refrigerator. I'd like to put more in that jar. That's where you come in.